Hi again, everyone. I am Dr. Flux, and this is General Psychology. Welcome back to Module 3, where we've been unraveling the mysteries of cognition. Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the most fascinating aspects of the mind, memory. Memory isn't just about recalling facts or storing experiences. It's the very foundation of how we understand and navigate the world around us. Before we jump in, let's start with a quick review to build on what we've covered so far. How would you define G in the context of intelligence? A, the general cognitive factor that influences all cognitive abilities. B, the seventh letter of the alphabet. C, a construct related to spatial problem solving. Or D, gender differences. The correct answer is A. G is the general factor that influences all cognitive abilities. Here's another one. Which theory suggests that there are distinct types of intelligence, such as musical or spatial intelligence, that operate independently? Is it A, general intelligence theory, B, multiple intelligence theory, C, emotional intelligence theory, or D, comparative cognition? The answer is B, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. This theory broadens our understanding of intelligence beyond a single measure like IQ. Excellent work. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever forgotten something you thought you'd never forget? Or maybe you've been sure you remembered something correctly, only to realize later that you got it wrong. That's the fascinating and sometimes frustrating world of memory. We'll explore the complexities of memory, how it works, why it's fallible, and what we can do to improve it. Memory is more than just a mental filing cabinet. It's a dynamic process that shapes who we are. Here's what we'll be tackling today. We'll start with the difference between recognition and recall, and how each can fail us. We'll take a look at how memory is reconstructed rather than replayed, with examples of its malleability. We'll take a look at the processes and systems of memory, encoding, storage, and retrieval. We'll discuss how memory is organized. And finally, we'll take a look at some practical strategies to harness the power of memory in everyday life before doing a bit of review and concluding. Let's begin by exploring two key ways we retrieve information: recognition and recall. You might be surprised by how different they are. Here's a question. Have you ever been certain you've recognized something, only to struggle when asked to describe or recreate it from memory? Let's start with an activity to get us thinking. We'll begin with two quick polls. Question 1. How much do you agree with the following statement? I can recognize a penny, 1 cent, if I see one. Strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. Number 2. I can accurately draw a penny from memory. Do you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? Now let's test that confidence. On the screen, you'll see 9 different images of pennies. Only one of them is the real one. Can you pick it out? Take your time. Make your selection. You ready? All right, let's reveal the correct answer. Many of us confidently say we could recognize a penny, but when faced with similar options, we often second-guess ourselves. Recognition is often impacted by how distinct the other options are. On the other hand, recall demands generating information without cues, like asking you to draw a penny from memory. Think of it this way. Recognition is like picking someone out of a lineup. Recall is like describing someone to a sketch artist. This can have some troubling implications when it comes to our justice system. Take, for example, the case of David Ranta. Ranta spent 23 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, partly due to an error in a police lineup. Eyewitnesses were confident in their recognition, but their memories were flawed. This highlights a critical point. Memory isn't like a perfect camera recording of our past. It's prone to errors, and these errors can have life-changing consequences. Why do these failures happen? Here's some common reasons. The first is interference. Similar details can confuse our memories. The second is priming. Context or suggestions can influence what we think we remember. We can also be impacted by cognitive load. When we're overwhelmed, memory retrieval becomes less accurate. Finally, our memories can be impacted by poor encoding. Sometimes memories aren't recorded very well, which can make our ability to recall things less accurate. Can you recall a time when your memory played tricks on you? How did you realize that you'd misremembered something? Take a moment to reflect on that. What do you think might have caused the error? Was it interference? Priming? Something else? Memory is fascinating, but it's imperfect. And as we'll see, it's not just prone to errors, it's also incredibly malleable. Imagine your memory as a jigsaw puzzle. It pieces together fragments of experience to create a picture of the past. But what happens when some pieces are missing, or the wrong ones are included? That's the challenge of memory. It's reconstructive, not a perfect recording. Let's test this idea with a quick activity. First, watch this 2024 viral video of a girl bravely fighting off a bear. Pay close attention to the details. You're going to need them. Okay, let's see how well you remember the scene. First question. What color was the girl's dress? Is it pink, black, gold, or blue? The answer is D, blue. This one may have been easy, as she was the central figure of the video. Let's try a few harder ones. How many bear cubs were with the adult bear? 0, 1, 2, or 3? The correct answer here is C, 2 cubs. You may not have been paying as much attention to this one. Finally, how many dogs were in the yard? 5, 4, 3, or 2? This one is even harder, as the dogs aren't the central focus of the video, and they're running in and out of the frame. The correct answer here is B, 4 dogs. Even if you were paying attention, some of these details might have slipped by. Why? Because memory is selective and often influenced by what seems important at the time. This is where memory gets fascinating and sometimes tricky. It's not just selective, it's also malleable. Let's explore a few studies that demonstrate just how easily our memories can be influenced. Have you ever been convinced of something that never happened? In a study by Wade and colleagues from 2002, researchers showed participants doctored photos of themselves as children, like riding in a hot air balloon, but it was something that they'd never actually done. The study took 20 participants who were between the ages of 18 and 28, so they weren't old enough to have memory problems. The researchers then took the doctored photos and asked the participants if they remembered the events. Now, here's the wild part. 50% of participants reported remembering the event. They even added vivid details that weren't in the photo. This study shows how suggestion and imagery can implant entirely false memories. Another classic study is by Loftus and Palmer from 1974, and it reveals how even subtle changes in language can distort memory. Participants in this study watched a video of a car accident and were asked to estimate the speed of the car when they either contacted, bumped, hit, collided, or smashed. The wording significantly influenced their speed estimates. And it didn't stop there. Participants who heard the word smashed were more likely to falsely remember seeing broken glass, even though there wasn't any. These studies highlight some key points about memory. Memory is incomplete. We often think that we have access to all the details of something that we've witnessed, but that's not the case. Memory is suggestible. Language, photos, or even casual comments can shape what we think we remember. Memory is reconstructive. Each time we recall something, we might alter it based on new information. And memory errors have real-world consequences. False memories can influence personal beliefs, relationships, and even legal outcomes. Now that we've seen how memory can be fallible, let's look at the underlying processes. Let's break memory down into 4 key stages: attention, encoding, storage, and retrieval. These processes work together to create, maintain, and access our memories. But if any stage falters, memory itself can fail. So let's explore each one. The initial phase involves attention. We need to direct our attention towards something to be able to make a memory about it. If we aren't paying attention to an event or a detail, we won't be recording it in our memory. Encoding is the next step. It's how we take in information. Think of it as entering data into a computer. Without encoding, nothing gets saved. There are different ways we encode information. Visual encoding involves processing images and spatial relationships. Acoustic encoding focuses on sounds, like rhymes and rhythms. Semantic encoding makes meaning out of information, which is the most effective way to encode in long-term memory. Imagine you're trying to remember a list of groceries. If you picture the items in your fridge, that's visual encoding. If you repeat the list aloud, that's acoustic encoding. But if you group items into categories, like fruits, vegetables, and snacks, you're using semantic encoding, which is far more effective. Once information is encoded, it needs to be stored. This involves maintaining it over time, much like saving a file on your computer. Memory storage happens at different levels. Sensory memory is a brief snapshot that holds information for a fraction of a second. For example, you might remember a flashing sign you just saw. Short-term memory holds small amounts of information for about 20 to 30 seconds, like a phone number you're about to dial. Long-term memory is a vast and durable storehouse for knowledge, experiences, and skills. This is where memories can last a lifetime. Finally, retrieval is how we access stored memories. We've already discussed 2 types of retrieval: recall and recognition. Now that we've covered how memory works at the process level, let's take a closer look at memory storage and organization. Memory isn't just one thing. It's an interconnected system that processes, stores, and retrieves information. But we typically divide memory into 3 systems that we saw earlier: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Let's explore how these systems work together. Sensory memory is where all incoming information starts. It acts as a buffer, capturing everything around you, but for just a brief moment. Its capacity covers our entire moment-to-moment experience of our senses, but its duration is extremely short. It lasts less than a second for visual information, or iconic memory, and only a few seconds for auditory information, or echoic memory. Imagine a lightning flash during a thunderstorm. You can visualize it vividly for a moment, but the image quickly fades unless you focus on it. That's sensory memory at work. Sensory memory helps us decide what's worth paying attention to, and sends it to the next stage: short-term memory. Once information grabs your attention, it moves into short-term memory, where it's held temporarily for processing. It's like a camera taking rapid snapshots of the world. The capacity of short-term memory is limited to about 7 plus or minus 2 items. This is also known as Miller's magic number. Its duration is around 20 to 30 seconds unless it's actively rehearsed. We can improve short-term memory using something called maintenance rehearsal, which is repeating information to keep it active, or through chunking, which is grouping information into meaningful units to maximize capacity. While this is probably something you don't do frequently, have you ever tried to remember a new phone number? If you repeat it to yourself, you're using maintenance rehearsal. If you group the digits into smaller chunks, like 555-123-4567, then you're chunking it. Short-term memory is like a workspace for your mind, where information is actively processed. If it's deemed important, it moves to long-term memory. Long-term memory is where information is stored for the long haul. It has an incredible capacity and duration. Some memories can last an entire lifetime. Its capacity is virtually unlimited for the human lifespan, and its duration can range from minutes to decades. Long-term memory includes explicit memory, or conscious memory. This includes episodic memory, or personal experiences, and semantic memory, which includes facts and knowledge. It also has implicit memory, which is an unconscious form of memory. This includes procedural memory, skills like riding a bike, as well as priming, which are specific kinds of associations. Think about your first day of school. That's an episodic memory. Now, consider knowing that the capital of France is Paris. That's semantic memory. Now let's touch on what happens when these systems fail us, when we forget, or when memory is disrupted due to processes like amnesia. Why do we forget information? There's several different reasons. It can include decay, when information fades over time if it's not rehearsed. Interference, which is when competing information disrupts recall, like studying for 2 exams back to back. It can be disrupted by insufficient priming, when retrieval cues are missing or unclear, and it can also be affected by disorganization. This is when memories might be stored but are hard to locate with the right mental framework. Amnesia involves forgetting or not being able to form memories, and there's 2 different types. Retrograde amnesia is the loss of past memories, and it often follows trauma. The classic film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind covers this type of amnesia. In it, Joel, played by Jim Carrey, discovers that his girlfriend Clementine, played by Kate Winslet, has undergone a procedure to erase him from her memories, so he decides to undergo the same procedure. Another type of amnesia is anterograde amnesia, the inability to form new memories. Another classic movie, Memento, which was Christopher Nolan's second film, follows Leonard Shelby, played by Guy Pearce, a man who cannot form new memories and is trying to discover the perpetrator who killed his wife. He uses a combination of Polaroids, handwritten notes, and tattoos to try to piece together his life and solve the mystery. Now that we've explored memory systems and why they sometimes fail, let's put theory into practice with a few memory experiments. Here's how this activity will work. You'll see 15 words, one at a time, displayed for 3 seconds each. You'll then be given a 60-second time delay. Then you'll be instructed to write down as many words as you can remember. Ready? Let's begin. Take a moment to count the total words that you wrote down. Did you remember all 15? Most people don't, and that's totally normal. Let's analyze what happened. Here, I've broken up the words into 3 different groups. How many words in each group did you remember? The primacy effect involves recalling more words from the beginning of the list. This can happen because information at the start of something is easier to encode and store in long-term memory. The recency effect covers words from the end of the list. Recent information tends to be easier to recall from short-term memory. Did you struggle more with the words in the middle? This is common. These words often fall into a memory gap. Now, how about the word vomit? Did you remember that one? Vomit was on the list, and it's a word that often stands out because of its emotional or sensory impact. This is an example of the conspicuity effect, where striking or unusual details are more likely to be remembered. Now let me ask, did you write down the word sleep? Take a second to check. Now here's the thing, sleep wasn't on this list, but many of the words were related to sleep, like bedroom, snore, and pillow. This demonstrates semantic priming, where related concepts activate schemas in your memory, leading you to misremember details. Finally, did the 60-second distractor video make it harder to recall the words? This is an example of cognitive load, when distractions or multitasking interfere with your ability to retrieve information. Which memory effects did you experience during the activity? How can understanding these effects help you in real-life situations? Take a moment to reflect on this. For example, knowing about the primacy and recency effects might inspire you to make the beginning and end of any presentations you give a bit more memorable. Let's try another activity. What if you wanted to really be able to remember a list? Let's choose something that most of us aren't super familiar with, unless you're a poli-sci major. The first 6 vice presidents of the United States. There's a technique that can make memory not just effective, but almost effortless. This technique is called the method of loci. It's an ancient memory strategy that uses spatial relationships to help you remember. The method of loci is simple. You associate items you want to remember with specific locations in a familiar space. It's like creating a mental journey where each stop triggers a memory. Now, for my CU Boulder students, imagine you're walking from Norland Library to the UMC. You pass by a few familiar landmarks. Now, let's say you need to remember the first 6 vice presidents of the United States: John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Aaron Burr, George Clinton, Elbridge Gerry, and Daniel Tompkins. You could create vivid mental images at each location to help you to recall them. Let's build this memory journey together. I'll show you a photo that shows a particular part of the route from the Norland Library to the UMC. Then we'll come up with a way to remember each vice president at that location. So this picture is of the library. You can think about this in any way that'll be memorable to you. I tend to think about libraries as academic and Adams both start with A. They sound similar, so academic, Adams. Here's a picture of the quad. For this one, I have to pair it with Jefferson. So maybe I'd remember that Jefferson had a plantation and this is an open grassy area. So that links Jefferson to this location. Jefferson, plantation, the quad. Now we're looking at this picture of bikes. So how can I associate that with Aaron Burr? Well, I can think about burrs, which are like thorns, and maybe one of these bicycle tires is flat because it has a burr in it. So bicycles and burrs, Aaron Burr. Now we're looking at this path. George Clinton makes me think of President Bill Clinton, and Clinton was a president between 2 Bushes, which was George Bush Sr. and George W. Bush. That's like these 2 trees at the end of this path. So between 2 Bushes, Clinton, George Clinton. Now we've got this statue. This is a particular location with a statue, and I think maybe that statue is a bit scary, and scary sounds like Gary, so Scary Gary. And now we're at the UMC doors. I think Tompkins sounds kind of like pumpkins, and the flagstone in the building is a bit orange like a pumpkin, so orange, pumpkin, Tompkins. So by attaching each name to a vivid, memorable scene in a familiar location, you create mental hooks that make retrieval easier. So let's review and see how well we can remember. All right, so here we've got the library. Libraries are academic, Adams, John Adams. This is a picture of the quad. It looks like a plantation. Thomas Jefferson had a plantation, Thomas Jefferson. This bike might have a flat tire because of a burr in it, Aaron Burr, the bikes. So we've got this path where there's 2 trees. Those trees are like bushes. That makes me think of the president's bushes with Bill Clinton in between it, but this isn't Bill Clinton, it's George Clinton. Now we're talking about George Clinton. The statue is Scary Gary. And the orange flagstone is like pumpkins. Pumpkins reminds me of Tompkins. There we go. We remembered. I remembered. I don't know if you did. So why is this technique so effective? It engages multiple systems. By combining spatial memory with vivid imagery, the method of loci taps into both visual and semantic encoding. It also uses familiar contexts. Familiar places act as strong retrieval cues, making it easier to access stored information. And it capitalizes on novelty. Unique or surprising associations are more likely to stick in memory. You can use the method of loci for almost anything. It works for studying for exams, giving speeches without notes, even memorizing grocery lists or to-do lists. It's a powerful tool that transforms abstract information into something tangible and easy to recall. Now that you've learned how to boost your memory using spatial associations, let's bring everything together with a final review. Today we journeyed through the fascinating world of memory, exploring how we process, store, and retrieve information. We started discussing recognition versus recall. Recognition is about identifying information when you see it, while recall involves retrieving information without cues. Both can fail us, as shown in the case of David Ranta and the penny experiment. We learned that memory is reconstructive and malleable, as demonstrated by studies like Wade et al. 2002 and Loftus and Palmer 1974. Be cautious of the influence of suggestion on your memory. We discuss memory processes, including encoding, storage, and retrieval, as the foundations of remembering. Effective encoding techniques like chunking and semantic associations can make memory stronger. We discuss sensory memory that captures fleeting moments, short-term memory which processes immediate information, and long-term memory which provides enduring storage. Each system works together, but forgetting and amnesia can disrupt these connections. Finally, we saw memory in action. We learned about different memory effects like the primacy, recency, conspicuity, and priming and distractor effects. And we also saw that by associating items with familiar locations, we can transform abstract information into vivid, memorable scenes. This ancient technique remains a modern powerhouse for improving memory via the method of loci. Before we conclude, let's do a bit of review. Which of the following best describes the primacy effect? A. Information presented at the end of a list is more easily remembered. B. Information presented in the middle of a list is forgotten. C. Information presented at the beginning of a list is more easily remembered. Or D. Information unrelated to the list is remembered better than the list itself. The correct answer is C. Information at the beginning of a list is often remembered better thanks to the primacy effect. Which of the following is an example of sensory memory? A. Recalling the name of your kindergarten teacher. B. Visualizing the layout of your room while you're at work. C. Memorizing a phone number by repeating it aloud. Or D. Briefly registering the image of a lightning flash after it disappears. The answer here is D. Sensory memory is the brief storage of sensory information, but it disappears almost immediately if it isn't transferred to short-term memory. As we close, I'd like you to consider this. How has today's lecture changed the way you think about memory? Do you see your memory as a tool you can refine and strengthen? Are you more aware of its limitations and the ways it can mislead you? Memory isn't just a function of the mind. It's a cornerstone of how we experience life. By understanding its strengths and weaknesses, we can better navigate our world. In our next module, we'll be talking about how we learn and specific understandings of learning through psychology. As always, thanks for joining me on this exploration of the mind. Remember to stay curious, stay resilient, and above all, live life in flux. Flux out. I'll see you in the next module.